By the 19th and 20th centuries, European powers had built massive empires stretching to all corners of the spherical globe. While some places had already broken off from the empires by this point, most of the world's land had been at least claimed by a European power in some capacity, with a few massive exceptions. When you look at the countries that were never colonized by European powers, you quickly see places like Japan and Thailand and Ethiopia, as well as some more dubious inclusions like Liberia, which was colonized by the United States of not Europe. But look in this general area and you see another pretty big exception that no one seems to talk about: Iran. So why was Iran never colonized? So it's the end of the 19th century. Carriages are starting to lose their horses, most of the rest of the world still calls Iran Persia, and Britain and Russia are really close to bordering each other. No, like over here. Now, Iran might not have specifically been part of any European empire, but that doesn't mean it went through the 19th and 20th centuries free from heavy European influence. After centuries fighting their Mediterranean neighbor to the west, like they've seemingly been doing for the past 2,500 years, Iran found itself in conflict with Russia, who had been conquering lands in Central Asia and the Caucasus, and Britain to the east, who had just taken over India pretty much out of 1,000 years of pent-up flavor deprivation. And Iran found itself in the good luck spot. Not because it was good luck, but because it's the sort of situation that makes people say, "Oh, good luck, buddy." Southwest Asia had become the center of a power play between these two superpowers, one which would become known as the Great Game. Go fish. Britain and Russia had begun to take over territories from Iran's Qajar dynasty, including Herat, which was ceded to Afghanistan, also notable British non-colony. The Qajars tried to strengthen the Iranian state through a series of measures and reforms that would later be known as defensive modernization. It actually kind of reminds me of what Japan was doing a few decades prior. However, this didn't exactly pan out. Iran's government at this time suffered from weak and largely divided institutions. Thus, while the government had a massive deficit, it didn't have the strength it needed to effectively raise taxes, with the government attempting other ways of making money. In 1872, for instance, Nasser ad-Din Shah sold off the rights to build new dams, trams, railroads, regular roads, mines, and industrial plants to Baron Julius de Ruyter, for which the newspaper is named after, an arrangement Lord Curzon described as the most complete surrender of the entire resources of a kingdom into foreign hands that has ever been dreamed of, much less accomplished, in history. But then, Germany wanted to build a railroad from Berlin to Baghdad, which Britain and Russia feared would make the Ottoman Empire a German ally. The 1907 Anglo-Russian Convention saw Iran split into a British and a Russian exclusive influence zone, leaving a neutral buffer zone in the middle, all marked by the European classic, awkward straight lines that pay no attention to anything. In the name of ending hostilities between the two powers, this treaty saw Iran, Afghanistan, and Tibet become little more than Anglo-Russian buffer zones. Which actually, fun fact, is why Afghanistan has this weird little finger corridor up here. Then, in 1908, attitudes toward Iran suddenly changed for no particular reason. Working under a concession from the Iranian government, British businessman William Darcy hired George Reynolds to prospect for oil. After 7 years of searching across the country, oil was finally discovered in Khuzestan, and the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was founded the following year. With the British government owning a majority stake in the company, this effectively meant that Britain now controlled Iran's oil exports. When World War the original series struck, Iran declared itself neutral. Although, given their position right between Britain, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire, which the first two were now at war against, this declaration of neutrality didn't exactly amount to much. Yeah, we feel you there, bud. Russia, supported by Britain, the Ottomans, supported by Germany, and the Qajars, supported by no one in Europe, fought for virtually the entirety of the war, even after Russia had to punch out a year early. Something about communism? Not sure. The Persian campaign eventually ended with the Treaty of Mudros, alongside Turkey's surrender from the war entirely, which is a whole story for another time, and afterwards in the Anglo-Persian Agreement of 1919, which gave the Anglo-Persian Oil Company drilling rights all across Iran. With Russia abandoning its sphere of influence in the north, Britain wanted to establish a protectorate over Iran, much like it already had across the Middle East. However, many other powers, namely the United States, denounced this move as hegemonic, as the US did not like colonial empires, and also wanted to drill for Iranian oil. In addition, the agreement would be denounced by the Iranian Majlis, or parliament, just 3 years afterward. Not like that actually changed anything. Between the wars, the Qajar dynasty would be replaced by the new Pahlavi dynasty, and the Anglo-Persian Iranian Oil Company signed a 60-year agreement promising to pay Iran £4 for every ton of oil exported, in exchange for Iran having no control over its oil exports. In World War The Next Generation, Iran noticed that German armies had been quite successful in their campaigns against the Soviet Union. Expecting Germany to ultimately win the war, clearly not realizing how terrifying that would have been, Iran refused Britain and the Soviet Union's request to expel German residents within Iran, and so the two invaded the country to ensure the Persian corridor would stay open, allowing supplies shipped into the Persian Gulf to still reach the Soviet Union. Reza Shah Pahlavi was deposed in place of his more Western-friendly crown prince Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who would continue to rule until the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Now, Iran might not have been part of the British Empire like India or Egypt, but by the mid-20th century, it would have been hard to doubt Britain's influence over Iran.